Ethan had never considered himself a hero. He was just a father, a single dad who worked long hours and did his best to raise his son, Noah, with love, patience, and the kind of stability he wished he'd had growing up. His days were filled with routine, morning school drop-offs, work shifts at the auto shop, quick dinners, and bedtime stories. Nothing extraordinary. Just life, moving forward one day at a time. But life has a strange way of surprising us when we least expect it. And that ordinary Friday afternoon would become the day everything changed. He and Noah were walking home from school, laughing about how Noah had managed to trade his apple for 2 cookies in the cafeteria. They stopped for ice cream, a simple tradition that Ethan had started to keep their bond strong. Chocolate chip for Noah, pistachio for Ethan, always the same. They walked through the park, taking the long way home just to enjoy the quiet. The sun was still out, filtering through the trees, and the sound of children playing echoed from a nearby playground. Everything felt safe, normal, and then he saw her. She couldn't have been more than 14. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, and her eyes, those eyes were wide with fear. She was being pulled by a man, maybe in his 40s, his grip rough and unforgiving. She was resisting, her feet dragging against the ground, her mouth moving, but no sound came. The world seemed to slow around Ethan as he processed what was happening. He didn't know her. He didn't know the man. But his instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Without a second thought, Ethan turned to Noah and said, "Stay right here." He put down his ice cream and ran. There was no plan, no hesitation. He didn't call out to the man or try to assess the situation. He didn't stop to wonder if the man might be her father or someone with authority. All he knew was that something in the girl's eyes begged for help. And sometimes, when the heart speaks louder than the mind, you just have to listen. Ethan reached them in seconds. He grabbed the man's shoulder, spun him around, and threw a punch straight to his jaw. The man stumbled back, surprised and furious, but let go of the girl, who collapsed to the ground in sobs. Ethan stood in front of her, fists clenched, chest heaving, daring the man to take one more step. But he didn't. A nearby jogger had already called the police. They arrived minutes later, in the chaos that followed. Ethan and Noah were taken to the station to give statements. The girl, whose name was Samantha, was taken by child protection officers. The man was arrested. And while Ethan felt relief that the girl was safe, doubts began to creep in. Had he done the right thing? What if the situation wasn't what it looked like? What if hitting someone, even to protect another, had crossed a line? But then came the truth. Samantha had been missing for over a week. She'd run away from home, trying to escape a violent stepfather, only to fall into the hands of a predator who promised her safety. The man dragging her that day wasn't family. He was a stranger who had lured her in, then tried to take her away when she tried to leave. Ethan's punch didn't just stop a moment of violence, it interrupted what could have become a lifetime of trauma. A few days later, Samantha asked to see Ethan. When they met, she didn't say much, just hugged him tightly and whispered, "I thought no one would stop him. I thought no one would care." That moment broke something open in Ethan. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about how many other children were out there, lost, scared, unseen. He thought about how close she'd come to disappearing again. And he thought about his own childhood, how he'd longed for someone to notice when he was hurting, someone to care, someone to act. So he made a decision. He applied to become a foster parent. It wasn't easy. He was a single father with limited income. His life was already full. Friends and family questioned his choice, worried that he'd be overwhelmed, but something inside him wouldn't let it go. Because after that day in the park, he realized that he had more than enough to offer, more than food, shelter, and clothing. He had empathy. He had love. And above all, he had the courage to show up. The process was long home studies, background checks, training sessions, but Ethan stayed committed. He kept thinking of Samantha. He didn't know where she was now, but he hoped she had found peace. Her memory became his motivation, a reminder that one brave act could echo far beyond that moment. Asterisk months later, the agency called with a placement. A teenage girl named Emily. She'd been through multiple homes. Quiet, guarded. They thought Ethan might be a good fit. He said yes. The first few weeks were hard. Emily barely spoke. She kept to herself, didn't eat much, and never looked anyone in the eye, but Ethan didn't push. He just kept showing up. He made breakfast, left notes on her door, invited her to game nights with Noah. Slowly, something began to shift. Asterisk one night. During a thunderstorm, Emily knocked on his door and asked if she could sit with them. She didn't say much, just curled up on the couch beside Noah, who handed her a blanket without a word. From that night on, she started coming out of her shell, just a little smiles, small conversations, a laugh here and there. Asterisk, it was the beginning of healing. A year later, Emily called him Dad. Asterisk, Noah called her sister. Asterisk, and Ethan, the man who once believed his life was just about getting by, discovered that his heart was big enough to hold more than he ever imagined. His brave act in the park didn't just save Samantha, it saved him. It reminded him of what truly matters, protecting the vulnerable, believing in second chances, and knowing that love, when given freely, always finds its way back. Asterisk, that single punch, thrown in a moment of instinct, became the first page in a new chapter. A chapter of purpose, family, and unexpected grace. Asterisk, because sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to change not just one life but many. Asterisk, forever. Ethan never saw himself as particularly brave. He wasn't a firefighter or a soldier. He wasn't someone with medals on his wall or stories of wild, heroic rescues. He was a mechanic, a single dad, a man who packed school lunches in the morning, fixed engines during the day, and read bedtime stories to his son Noah every night. His world was simple, grounded in routines and quiet love. But life has a way of testing the quiet ones, those who live humbly, who expect nothing in return. And sometimes, those are the people who shine brightest when it matters most. Asterisk, it was a warm Friday afternoon when Ethan and Noah were walking home from school. The week had been long, full of errands, bills, and the kind of exhaustion only single parents truly understand. But Ethan cherished those small moments with Noah, the shared ice creams, the way his son told stories with exaggerated hand gestures, the peaceful silence when they walked side by side without needing to say anything. Asterisk, they had just crossed the park when Ethan noticed something strange near the edge of the trees. A girl no older than 14 was being pulled by a man in a way that immediately raised alarm bells in his mind. Her face was red, her steps hesitant. She kept looking around, her eyes silently begging someone to notice, and Ethan did. He could have ignored it. He could have looked away, convinced himself it wasn't his business. He had his son with him. He had responsibilities. He could have waited to be sure, could have taken time to think, to analyze, to ask questions. But he didn't wait for certainty. He didn't wait for permission. He just acted. Stay right here, he told Noah, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. He set down the ice cream and walked, then jogged it, then ran toward the man and the girl. Asterisk, by the time he reached them, his instincts had taken over completely. He grabbed the man's shoulder, spun him around, and punched him hard. Asterisk, the man stumbled. The girl fell to the ground, sobbing. Ethan stood between them, shielding her, ready to fight if needed. He didn't ask if she was okay until she was safely behind him. He didn't check to see if the man had a weapon. He didn't wonder if people would judge him later. In that moment, all that mattered was that someone needed help, and he was there. Asterisk, that punch, simple and powerful, carried with it the full weight of a father's protectiveness. Not just for his own child, but for any child. Because Ethan didn't see a stranger's daughter, he saw a scared, hurting human being. And he knew he couldn't walk away. Asterisk, the police came soon after, thanks to a jogger who had witnessed everything and called for help. The man was arrested. The girl, who they later learned was named Samantha, was taken into protective custody. Asterisk, but Ethan? He was questioned, interrogated. They asked him whether he had known the girl, whether he had provoked the man, whether he had used excessive force. It was painful, frustrating, He had stepped in to help. Was that not enough? Asterisk, and yet, deep down, he didn't regret it. Because he knew he had done what was right. Asterisk, days later, the truth unraveled. Samantha had been missing for over a week. She'd run away from an abusive home and had been lured by a man who promised her safety but had darker intentions. The man dragging her that day was not family, not a friend. He was someone who had taken advantage of her desperation. Asterisk, Ethan hadn't saved her because he had all the facts. He didn't rescue her because he was certain of her story. He saved her because her eyes cried for help. And that was enough. Asterisk, you see. We often think of kindness as something gentle, polite, planned, but the truth is, real kindness doesn't always come in pretty packages. Sometimes it's loud, urgent, instinctive. Sometimes kindness is a punch to the jaw when someone is being hurt. Sometimes it's standing up when everyone else stays seated. Sometimes it's choosing to act when the world tells you to stay out of it. Asterisk, Ethan didn't need permission to care. He didn't need someone to tell him it was okay to protect a vulnerable soul. He didn't wait for a green light. His heart told him what to do, and he listened. Asterisk, and in doing so, he taught not only his son, but everyone who would later hear this story that kindness is not passive. It's not something we perform when it's convenient or applauded. It's something we live, especially in the moments when it's uncomfortable, risky, or even dangerous. Asterisk, after the incident, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Samantha, about what would have happened if he hadn't been there. What if no one had stopped? What if everyone had assumed someone else would help? The thought haunted him. Asterisk, that's when he started researching, learning, reading stories of kids like Samantha, children who fall through the cracks of the system, teens who run away not out of rebellion but out of survival. He couldn't believe how many there were lost in the shadows, ignored by society, just hoping someone would care enough to act. Asterisk, he realized then that his act of kindness didn't have to end in that park. Asterisk, so he decided to become a foster parent. It was a long road, paperwork, home studies, interviews. People questioned his decision. You're already stretched thin. You have your own child to worry about. This isn't your responsibility. But Ethan knew something now that he couldn't unknow. If you see someone vulnerable and you do nothing, you become part of the silence that allowed their pain. Asterisk, eventually, he welcomed a teenager named Emily into his home. Like Samantha, she was quiet, hesitant, full of mistrust. And Ethan, he didn't try to fix her. He just showed up. Every day. With patience, with steadiness, with the same fierce heart that once led him to throw a punch without apology. Asterisk, slowly, Emily opened up, laughed, shared, healed. Asterisk, and as she grew into her own strength, Ethan realized something beautiful. Asterisk, kindness doesn't wait for perfect timing. It doesn't ask for certainty. It just shows up, bold, honest, ready. Asterisk, sometimes kindness is quiet like a warm meal or a soft word. Asterisk, and sometimes kindness is fierce like standing between a predator and his prey. Asterisk, but in any form, kindness is never weakness. It is power, it is grace, and most of all, it is a choice. Ethan made that choice once in a park, without knowing the outcome. Asterisk, and it changed not only the life of a girl he barely knew. Asterisk, it changed his life too, forever. If this story touched your heart, asterisk, if even for a moment you felt that love, hope, and kindness still exist in this world, then please give this video a like. Asterisk, share it with someone who might need a little inspiration, a silent prayer, or a ray of light right now. Asterisk, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Everyday grace stories, so you never miss more true, heartfelt stories like this one. Asterisk, your one like, one share could change someone's life. Asterisk, thank you from the heart.